As the early morning fog lifted over the sprawling ranch, Daniel stood at the edge of the weathered fence, his eyes scanning the horizon. The land stretched out before him untamed and silent, almost as if it were waiting for him to breathe life back into it. He had inherited this place from his uncle, a ranch that had sat untouched for years, its once vibrant past a distant memory now shrouded in dust and decay. At first glance, the ranch seemed abandoned, a relic of a bygone era. The barn doors hung crookedly on their hinges, and the fields were overrun with wild grasses. The only sounds were the distant calls of birds and the soft rustling of trees in the wind. It was the perfect blank slate. Daniel, eager to get started, already had plans to restore the ranch to its former glory. His dream was to revive the land, introduce new livestock, and turn this forgotten property into something thriving again. But as he walked further into the ranch, an unfamiliar sense of unease crept over him. Something didn't feel quite right. The silence was unsettling, and there were strange signs, small clues he couldn't explain. The odd trail of footprints leading into the woods, the sound of something moving in the barn when no one else was around, and the peculiar feeling that he wasn't as alone as he thought. He chalked it up to his imagination, thinking perhaps he was just getting lost in the excitement of the task ahead. But deep down, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something hidden in this forgotten corner of the world, something that had been quietly living in the shadows for much longer than he realized. Days passed as Daniel dove into the task of restoring the ranch. Each morning, he walked the property, inspecting barns, fences, and fields, his boots crunching in the dry grass. At first, the work was mundane, fixing roof tiles, clearing out overgrown hedges, but there was something strange about the ranch that he couldn't ignore. One afternoon, while making his way through the woods that bordered the land, Daniel noticed a peculiar trail of hoof prints, fresh and deep in the soft earth. They led toward a dilapidated barn that he hadn't paid much attention to before, hidden away on the far end of the property. The barn's door was barely hanging on its hinges, and the wood was weathered from years of neglect. He'd assumed it was nothing more than an old structure left to rot. But something about it now piqued his curiosity. He slowly approached, his footsteps muffled in the snow-dusted ground. As he pushed open the door, the dim light revealed a scene that left him frozen in place. A horse. A beautiful, gray mare, standing quietly in the shadows, her coat glossy despite the neglect of the barn. She eyed him cautiously but didn't shy away. Surprised and confused, Daniel stepped forward, his heart racing. How was she here? Where had she come from? Before he could process it, he heard another sound, soft, barely audible at first. A rustling from behind a stack of old hay bales. He moved closer, heart pounding, and to his shock, found a small calf, huddled in the corner, chewing on some hay. It wasn't just the mare. There was more. As Daniel scanned the barn, his eyes widened. In the farthest corner, hidden beneath a thick layer of dust and straw, he spotted the shapes of other animals, rabbits, a couple of goats, and even a few chickens, all living in secret within the walls of the barn. Each of them looked well-fed, their coats healthy and their eyes bright. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The ranch, it seemed, was not as abandoned as he had thought. These animals had been hidden here, thriving in the shadows, away from the world. A rush of questions filled Daniel's mind. Who had been taking care of them? And why had they been kept a secret? The realization hit him like a thunderclap. There was something much deeper going on here, and he was only just beginning to uncover it. The more Daniel explored, the more bizarre the discoveries became. What began as a handful of hidden animals in one barn soon revealed itself to be part of a much larger, intricate network of life tucked away throughout the ranch. He returned to the barn every day, and soon, he found more animals, each one seemingly cared for with great attention. There were more horses, some wild, others tame, and each appeared to have their own separate space within the sprawling ranch. It wasn't just the barn. One afternoon, while walking along the perimeter of the ranch near an old creek, Daniel spotted what looked like a series of well-constructed pens, partially camouflaged by trees and overgrowth. He pushed through the thick brush, his heart racing with the anticipation of another hidden world. Inside the pens, he found more animals, pigs, sheep, and even a few deer, all quietly grazing or lounging in the shade. Every single animal was healthy and appeared to have enough food and water. They were not abandoned, they were cared for, hidden, and somehow living just out of sight. But who could have been managing all of this? Daniel had been on the ranch for over a week now, and there was no sign of any workers or anyone else around. The place had seemed completely empty when he first arrived, and yet, the evidence of someone caring for these animals was overwhelming. Determined to uncover the truth, Daniel spent the following days combing through the ranch's records. He searched the old office in the main house and rifled through dusty boxes of papers stored in the attic. As he dug deeper, he came across something that made his stomach drop, a series of handwritten journals. They were old and fragile, but the ink was still legible. The first journal he opened belonged to his late uncle, but it didn't read like a simple ranching log. The pages described the animals he had been bringing onto the property, not to breed or sell, but to protect. There were notes on how each species was special, how they had been rescued from dangerous situations, and how some had even been deemed too valuable to the ecosystem to be allowed to roam freely. The animals, it seemed, had all been saved from poaching, illegal trade, or habitat destruction. Daniel flipped through the pages in disbelief. His uncle had turned this ranch into a sanctuary, but one that was kept secret. There was mention of a government project designed to protect endangered species, one that required discretion due to its sensitive nature. The animals that were being cared for on the property weren't just farm animals or strays, they were part of a covert operation to preserve species at risk. The more he read, the more Daniel realized how deeply involved his uncle had been in protecting these creatures. The secrecy wasn't just for the animals' safety, it was for the protection of the ranch, too. There had been threats from poachers and illegal hunters, and his uncle had feared that bringing attention to the ranch could put everything at risk. That's why everything was kept under wraps, why no one knew about the sanctuary. The animals had been hidden, but not out of neglect, rather, out of love and necessity. As the weight of this new truth settled in, Daniel couldn't help but feel a growing sense of responsibility. His uncle had entrusted him with this legacy, this secret sanctuary, and it was now up to him to decide whether to carry it on or expose it to the world. But one thing was clear, the ranch was far more than just a piece of land, it was a refuge for creatures in need, a place where life was not only preserved but nurtured. As Daniel sat in his uncle's dusty old office, the journals spread out before him, he felt the weight of the decision ahead. His mind raced as he processed everything he had uncovered. His uncle had spent years quietly running this sanctuary, safeguarding the animals from the threats of poachers and the ever-encroaching human world. He had done it all in secrecy, under the radar, and now it was Daniel's turn to decide what would happen to the ranch and the animals going forward. He knew that exposing the sanctuary could bring public attention and much-needed resources. There was no denying that the cause was noble. The animals were precious, and the ranch could become a national treasure, a beacon for conservation efforts. He thought about the people who could help: animal rights activists, government agencies, and environmental organizations. Together, they could transform this hidden haven into a fully recognized sanctuary. The land could thrive, and the animals would finally be able to live without fear of being hidden away. But then the darker thought crept in. What if the exposure did more harm than good? The ranch's secrecy had been carefully guarded for a reason. If the world learned about it, poachers could become aware of the valuable species protected there. The sanctuary could become a target, an oasis of rare animals that would attract hunters, or worse, unscrupulous breeders looking to profit from endangered species. There were people who would see the animals not as precious lives to be protected, but as commodities to be exploited. Daniel stared out the window, his mind weighing the options. He could follow his uncle's path, continuing the secrecy, and keep the ranch safe from the outside world. But could he live with the guilt of hiding something so important? He had the opportunity to share this incredible story, to give the animals the attention and resources they deserved, but it would come at a cost. His uncle had clearly believed in the sanctuary's quiet existence, a place where animals were protected not just by law, but by the belief that they didn't need the spotlight. The ranch had become a place of peace for these creatures, hidden from a world that often didn't understand their value. Would shining a light on it destroy that peace? Then, as he walked among the animals grazing horses, a family of deer, and the long-legged goats, he felt a deep connection. These creatures weren't just living here, they had adapted to the land and thrived in its silence. They didn't need human approval or validation, they needed safety and care, which his uncle had so carefully provided. Could he, in good conscience, risk that for the chance to make the sanctuary famous? The decision was becoming clearer, though the weight of it pressed down on him like an anchor. Daniel knew what he had to do. He couldn't expose the ranch, not yet. Not until he was sure the world was ready to protect it as fiercely as his uncle had. There was still time to preserve the sanctuary without compromising its safety. He would honor his uncle's legacy, maintaining the sanctuary's secret for now, but in time, he vowed to build awareness slowly, carefully. When the world was ready to respect and protect the animals as they deserved, he would share the story. Until then, the ranch would remain a quiet haven, its secret safe, its inhabitants protected. Just as Daniel thought he had settled on his decision, everything changed. It started with a knock at the door, a sound that broke the quiet routine he had come to appreciate at the ranch. Hesitant, he opened the door to find a man in a suit standing on the threshold, holding a folder in his hand. His presence felt out of place on the remote ranch, the sharp contrast to the untamed wilderness surrounding them making Daniel uneasy. "I'm Agent Harris," the man said, his tone professional but not unfriendly. "I've been assigned to investigate the property here. We've received some reports of unusual activity on the land. I'd like to take a look around." Daniel's stomach tightened. His first instinct was to turn the man away, but his uncle's warnings echoed in his mind. Authorities weren't always allies when it came to something like this. The thought of exposing the ranch's secret so soon terrified him. Would they understand the value of the sanctuary, or would they see only the potential for a legal nightmare? Sure, come in," Daniel said, trying to mask his nerves. His mind raced, trying to think of an explanation. As the agent walked through the house, Daniel's eyes darted toward the barn. He could feel the tension in the air thickening. The agent began asking questions, probing deeper into the history of the ranch, its operations, and its ownership. Daniel remained calm, but his heart pounded as he led him toward the barn. His mind spun. He hadn't told anyone about the animals, not yet, not anyone outside the quiet world he had created here. When they reached the barn, Daniel opened the door, his breath catching in his throat. The agent stepped inside, his eyes widening as he took in the sight of the animals quietly grazing in their pens, living peacefully in the shadow of the barn's beams. The goats, the horses, the rabbits, each animal was a testament to his uncle's quiet but extraordinary work. "I didn't know about this," Agent Harris said, his voice low. "This isn't just a ranch. This is a sanctuary. You've been hiding endangered species here, haven't you?" The words hit Daniel like a wave. The truth was out now, but it was far from the way he had imagined it. He had wanted to reveal the sanctuary on his terms, when he felt the world was ready. But now, it had been uncovered unintentionally, suddenly, and without warning. The conflict between protecting the animals and facing the legal ramifications had begun. Daniel knew that this moment could change everything. The agent's presence marked the beginning of a new chapter, one where the sanctuary could no longer be hidden. Days turned into weeks as Daniel worked tirelessly, navigating the labyrinth of regulations and legal requirements that came with officially turning his uncle's ranch into a wildlife sanctuary. His initial apprehension had gradually given way to a newfound sense of purpose. Each meeting with conservationists, environmental lawyers, and animal rights activists brought new challenges, but also fresh hope. The more he learned about the intricate world of wildlife protection, the more he understood just how essential this sanctuary was, not just for the animals, but for the surrounding community and future generations. With the sanctuary officially recognized, the ranch began to transform. Gone were the days of secrecy. The public, once unaware of the hidden treasure that lay within the ranch's boundaries, now became its greatest ally. The first public tours were a success, drawing people from all walks of life. Families, students, animal lovers, and conservation enthusiasts came to witness the animals in their natural habitats, learning about the endangered species his uncle had worked so hard to protect. The animals, once confined to the shadows, were now on display as symbols of hope and survival. Daniel watched as children gazed wide-eyed at the once hidden creatures, their laughter echoing in the open air. The wild horses, once so skittish, now wandered freely in larger, secure pastures. The deer roamed in harmony with the goats, the air filled with the soft murmur of nature's balance. The sanctuary was not just a refuge for the animals, it was a space of education and advocacy. It was a place where people could connect with wildlife on a personal level, and in doing so, understand the importance of preserving these creatures for future generations. But even as the sanctuary flourished, Daniel remained deeply aware of the responsibilities that came with it. No longer could he hide behind his uncle's legacy. He was the steward now, the protector, the one who had to ensure that the ranch's mission would continue long after him. There were still challenges ahead: funding, government regulations, and the ever-present threat of poaching, but Daniel was no longer daunted by them. He had inherited more than just a piece of land. He had inherited a calling. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the land, Daniel stood at the edge of the ranch. His gaze lingered on the horizon where the wild, rolling hills met the sky. The once desolate, abandoned property was now teeming with life. The ranch was thriving, not in spite of its secrets, but because of them. His uncle had known that sometimes, the quietest spaces could become the most powerful. In that moment, Daniel felt a deep sense of peace. He understood the true meaning of his uncle's work, and the value of preserving the fragile balance between man and nature. It was no longer just a place to protect endangered species, it was a living testament to the power of conservation, the strength of silence, and the importance of stewardship. The ranch had become a new beginning not just for Daniel, but for the animals, the community, and the world beyond. The secrets that had once kept it hidden were now the very reason it could thrive. And as he looked out over the land, Daniel knew that this was just the start. The sanctuary's legacy would live on, in the quiet spaces of the earth and the hearts of those who would come after him.